So I'm taking a real risk here. I'm recording this episode of the Morning Pitt yesterday. What will be yesterday? Sort of Wednesday afternoon. We had the live Panther-Lair show last night, so we didn't have time. Weren't really going to be able to record it in the evening. So we recorded it in the afternoon, sort of assuming there won't be any more news that comes out between the time we record this and the time we release it here on Thursday morning. If there is, I'll have to re-record it. And if you're watching this video, and I'm saying this right now, that no major news came out in the interim. However, if I'm particularly more grumpy during this video, then you'll know that something did come out. And maybe I'll just start recording it here, and if something happens, I'll just kind of cut it at some point and tape it. Instead of retaping the entire thing, I'll retape the final like 10 minutes or however long it is, and then I'll be more grumpy there, because there's nothing worse than having to redo it. I've had a few of these that I've taped over the years, and a technical issue or something like that, and you're like, oh no, I have to redo the whole thing, and that's never fun to redo work that you've already done. So we're going to keep our fingers crossed here that there's no news that comes out of the transfer portal for Pitt to, in the last 12 hours or so since we recorded this thing. And we'll keep our fingers crossed on that one. But I did think, obviously Tuesday was a big day of news on the transfer portal side, with 3 players going into the portal, Amsal Delilich and the Diaz Graham twins. And then, so we obviously had a lot to talk about yesterday about that. But I thought today, just kind of some general thoughts on the portal, on Pitt's position in the portal, on the players they have remaining, who has not declared for anything yet, and kind of what they're going to need to do to fill out this roster. So I'd like to sit down and say this is 5 thoughts on the transfer portal. Let's just call it that. Actually, it's 5 thoughts on the transfer portal, because it might be 3, it might be 7. I don't know. It'll depend on how many things I want to talk about and how much we have time to do. But let's call this 5 thoughts on where Pitt stands with the transfer portal as of March 27th here on the Thursday edition of the Morning Pitt. YouTube.com/Panther-Lair.com. Yeah, you should always have like a catchy title like that, right? Like 5 thoughts on the transfer portal, 5 things Pitt needs out of the portal, 5 players Pitt cannot afford to lose. Well, they've only got 5 left right now. So let's say those 5 are the 5 they cannot afford to. You always should have like a catchy title, but the reality is we sort of get, we're kind of have a loose structure here to the Morning Pitt. And so I might have 5 things that I've written down here on the old legal pad. And I don't know if I've got 5 exactly written down, but I can see how a few of these could offshoot in to create 5. But who knows? Maybe I'll get onto a topic and it'll lead to 3 or 4 other thoughts. They just kind of come out of, like I say, our loose structure. So we'll call this 5 thoughts on the portal, but we'll see how many we actually get to. Just to take stock of everything so far, again, unless there was anything that changed in the last 12 hours, in which case I'm going to be far more grumpy about this when I have to re-record it. Pitt has lost 4 scholarship players to the transfer portal: Marlon Barnes Jr., Guillermo Diaz-Graham, Jorge Diaz-Graham, and Amsal Delilich. 3 Pitt scholarship players are gone to graduation: Ishmael Leggett, Damian Dunn, and Zach Austin. And then Pitt has 5 scholarship players remaining who could potentially all return. They have not announced their intentions. And if there is news that comes out that came out like last night of one of these guys announcing that they're going to stay, we're not re-recording anything. Maybe I'll add a little addendum at the end. But we're looking at Jalen Lowe, Brandon Cummings, Cam Corrin, Papa Amadou Conti, and Omni Najai. Those are the 5 who have not announced that they're going into the transfer portal. We assume most, if not all, of those guys are coming back, and that's. The discussion of those guys coming back is a little bit secondary to some of the things I want to talk about today, but it's going to be kind of part of it, because part of what we have to talk about is what Pitt needs to fill out this roster, and what Pitt needs in order to get a usable roster together for the 2025-26 season. And that's going to come out of the transfer portal. I guess you could add Amari Witherspoon, the incoming freshman, to that list. But really, we're talking about the returning roster, the departing roster, and what they need to add around the guys who are on the roster this year. First, a couple thoughts on the Diaz Grahams. Diaz's Graham? How do you pluralize that? Diaz Grahams? Diaz's Graham? A couple thoughts on Jorge and Guillermo. First of all, like I said yesterday, I'm disappointed to see those guys go. I think they had value on the court, and they were always fun to interview. They were fun guys to have around, good guys to have around. I think in the program and sort of outside the program, I think it was fun. It was fun to have them at Pitt for the last 3 years. We'll get to that part in a second. I think for Jorge, leaving here made the most sense. I mean, 1 year of eligibility left. You've got to make a decision, of what you're trying to do with basketball. And if you feel like you're not going to get that much of an opportunity here, then you've got to pursue it elsewhere. And this past season, Jorge Diaz-Graham averaged 7.2 minutes per game. Despite shooting almost 50% from three, he was 20 of 42. He averaged 7.2 minutes per game over the course of 29 games. He didn't even play in every game. And that's not going to get you the kind of exposure that you need in order to pursue anything beyond college. To come back for another year and only play 7 minutes per game, and not saying that was etched in stone that was going to be his usage, but this is what he got as a junior. So is he really expecting that much more as a senior than 7.2 minutes per game? You can't come back and bank your future or what you hope your career to be on that kind of usage. You just can't. And so it makes sense for him to go. I think it sort of makes sense for Guillermo as well. And this one, while we can talk about Jorge's limited minutes being on the coaching staff, I think this one might be even more with Guillermo, because look, I think you, me, and just about everybody agrees that Guillermo wasn't really used to maximize his abilities this past season when he's playing as the power forward. And we could go down a long road of why they arrived at that point, how they arrived at that point. I don't think it was the intention in the offseason. Well, it's okay, we're going to have Guillermo at the 4. I think there were efforts made to try to get another power forward in here, somebody else who could play in that role, or maybe even failing that, Zach Austin playing in that role. They missed on those power forward options. And then, they seemed to be content to go into the season with Guillermo as the 4. And once Damian Dunn got hurt, it became even less likely that they could move Zach Austin to that spot. And so you go all the way until the final game of the regular season, moving forward with this failed experiment of, basically having 2 centers on the court at the same time. And I even asked Jeff Capel, might have been before New Year's Day or maybe early in the ACC schedule, when Guillermo was struggling, when he wasn't shooting well, when he wasn't making a lot of shots, and he was struggling. You remember the points where Jeff Capel was giving rather impassioned defenses of Guillermo Diaz-Graham, talking about how hard he's working and how hard it's been, and everybody at Pitt loves him and all this stuff. I remember asking him, is he getting different kinds of shots, playing a different position? Is he getting the same kind of shots he was getting previously, or is he having to get different kinds of shots? And Capel said, yeah, he's doing different things. He's being asked to do different things. He's taking different types of shots, and that's probably adversely affecting his shooting percentage. He finished the season shooting 31.6% from 3. That's well below what he's capable of. And I think it due at least in part to his usage and how he was deployed. And I think if you're Guillermo Diaz-Graham, unless you have an absolute assurance that you're going to be used in a way that maximizes your ability, you probably need to look for somewhere else. Because again, you're 3 years into this thing. You've got 1 year of eligibility left. Can you afford to, if you have aspirations beyond college basketball, can you afford to spend it here when you're not being used to the best of your ability? Now, maybe you were being used for how the team best needed you to be used. And we could probably debate that. We could have a side conversation. We've had that conversation all season long. But if you're Guillermo Diaz-Graham and you're looking at it from your perspective, you're probably not getting the kind of usage that you need, or that's going to really maximize you and showcase you, in addition to helping the team win. And that's unfortunate, because I think that's one where it was potentially avoidable. Now, it would have been interesting. I don't know if they would have had great options for what kind of lineups to deploy if they just slid Guillermo back to the 5 full time. I don't know if you're looking at Zach Austin at the 4, if you're getting Jorge more minutes at the 4, if you're digging in Amsal Delilich. I mean, they clearly weren't comfortable going with Jorge or Amsal in those roles for extended minutes basically all season long. So maybe the staff felt like they didn't have another option, but I think it did a disservice to Guillermo, and maybe the team as a whole, but certainly to Guillermo, I think it did a bit of a disservice to use him that way. And I think he's looking for something that's going to fit him a little better. Now, with those two guys going, what you lose a lot of things. And one, which side do I want to start on? All right, one thing you lose with these guys, we'll start in the locker room, okay? Because those two guys were some of the they're probably the only remaining scholarship players from that NCAA tournament team 3 years ago, 2 years ago, however you want to look at it. Unless I'm forgetting someone, and I don't think I am. They were the remaining players from that tournament team. And I think going from that year to the next year, and then from that next year, which would have been last season, to this season, they provided some of that linkage. You know, Blake Hinson was there to get from one year to the next, and then Jalen Lowe and Ishmael Leggett to come into this year, and Zach Austin to come into this year. But the Diaz-Graham twins were something of a constant that were able to carry over some of the culture, some of the locker room presence, and some of just what made those teams so tight over the last 3 years. And I'm not saying you can't have that again without those guys, but now you've got very little kind of linking that success from 3 years ago to where they are now going into next season. And, you know, you'd like to think that Jalen Lowe picked up some of it. You'd like to think that Brandon Cummings picked up some of it. I guess Cam Corrin potentially returning. But the Diaz-Graham twins, I think, really were a connection with that past and connection with what worked and how you need to have the locker room built and sort of personnel management. You know, I think they were a connection to that, and they helped carry it over and create some linkage. And I don't know, I don't think that's just an automatic thing you can replace. I mean, you'd like to think that when you recruit transfers, you bring guys in, they're going to have the right kind of attitude. You're going to find the right kind of guys, not just in terms of skills and abilities, but the right types of people to go into the locker room and fill the roster. But as we've seen in the past, that's no guarantee. You know, at a certain point prior to that NCAA tournament team, they turned it around a little bit. I mean, they got Jamarius Burton the year before, but his voice kind of got drowned out by some of the other negativity around the program. But, you know, they brought in Nelly Cummings, they brought in Blake Hinson, they brought in Greg Elliott. These guys had a significant positive impact, but so too did the Diaz-Graham twins and Federico. Now you don't have any of that. And I don't think that's unimportant. And it's not something we're going to be able to gauge the success of replacing, you know, by looking at who they've contacted in the portal or even who they signed in the portal. It's something we'll get a sense of after the fact. But I don't think it's something you can just hand wave away or ignore. I mean, I think it's relevant and it's significant to not have that presence, which they did have for a few years. And I think the Diaz-Graham twins provided that. The other thing they provided was the shooting. You know, even if Jorge didn't get the opportunities that he should have, Guillermo and Jorge combined made 56 three-pointers this past season. That ties them with Zach Austin led the team with 56 made threes. Jorge and Guillermo made 56 combined. You're losing that. And I mean, you're losing a ton of three-point shooting overall from this team. Zach Austin led the team with 56 made threes. He's gone. Ishmael Leggett was second on the team with 48 made threes. He's gone. Jalen Lowe had 41, so he's back. But Guillermo had 36. He's gone. Brandon Cummings had 29. He's back. Damian Dunn had 21 made threes. He's gone. Jorge had 20. He's gone. So 5 out of your top 7 guys in terms of making threes. Really, 5 out of all, you know, other than Amsal, who made like 12. 5 out of your 7 guys who made 20 or more three-pointers this past season are all gone. And the only ones you're returning are Jalen Lowe and Brandon Cummings. Lowe, of course, shot sub 27%, 41 of 154. An astonishing amount of threes for him to attempt. Cummings was closer to 40. He was 37.7%, made 29 out of 77. So you bring back 2 guys, but you lose a lot of three-point shooting this offseason. You're losing a lot of three-point shooting this offseason to the transfer portal in the form of the Diaz-Graham twins or to graduation in terms of Damian Dunn, Ishmael Leggett, and Zach Austin. And that's tough. And that's something they're going to have to replace in the portal. Because even if you bring back Cummings and Lowe, That's only 2 guys. You need a lot more shooting, and you're going to need it on the wings. You're going to need to bring in multiple guards and wings who can shoot. And you'd like to think you can go find those guys just about anywhere. There should be shooters all over the place in the transfer portal coming from the lower levels. Shooting should be able to translate. Shooting should be able to travel. They were able to get Greg Elliott out of Marquette, which, I'm not going to disparage Marquette. That obviously very good program, very good team, made the NCAA tournament, which is more than we can say for others. But you could go find those guys, and they're going to need multiple shooters because I don't see them returning. When we talk about losing 5 guys who all made 20 or more 3-pointers, and the team last year as a whole having 7 guys who made 20 or more 3-pointers, they're returning 2 of those guys, which means you're going to need, can you find 5 more 3-point shooters? Probably not. That was probably a unique situation, but you're going to need to make up that volume somehow, and you're going to have to make it up out of the portal, finding more guards. One of the biggest issues that we talked about last season, particularly late in the season when it became really apparent, and I've hammered this point a lot of times, and I know that, so I apologize for repeating myself, but the lack of ball handlers, the lack of guys who could create was a major issue for this offense, because for the vast majority of the season, they had Jalen Lowe and Ishmael Leggett. And those were the only 2 guys. And you could go with an extra small lineup by bringing Brandon Cummings out there. But when you stuck with that lineup, particularly after Damian Dunn got hurt, and you didn't really have another option, they had Lowe and Leggett, and then you had the 3 complementary pieces in Austin and Guillermo and Cam Corrin. That's not enough guys to create. You need 3 ball handlers on the court. I think with the way Jeff Capel wants to play, with the kind of things they try to do on offense, you need 3 of those guys who can create. So what you're looking for now, if you bring back Lowe and Cummings, you're looking for guards and wings who can shoot and create. And everybody wants guards and wings who can shoot and create. And fortunately, there's like 1,500 guys in the transfer portal, so there's plenty of guards and wings who can shoot and create. But that is a huge priority for Pitt. And now when you take Guillermo out of the mix, even if you felt like he was misused as a 4, it still creates an opening. You know what I mean? With Guillermo gone and Zach Austin gone, and even Amsal gone, and Jorge gone, you need a 4, at least one. And then that gets into another question for the staff, which I'm probably going to address in the 3-2-1 column tomorrow, because I think it's an interesting question of what kind of power forward are you looking for? If we talk about needs in the transfer portal, obviously there's needs in the backcourt. You only have 5 guys. There's needs all over the place. But there's obviously needs in the backcourt. You're going to need to fill in the guard rotation and have at least 4 guards going into next season, like older guys, veteran guys, not a freshman. You're going to need at least 4 guards, and you're going to need a couple of wings. And, you have to decide what you want the power forward position to be. Do you want the power forward position to be a stretch position, a guy who's going to step out and knock down threes? Or are you compelled by the lack of rebounding from your center to go find a power forward who can play in the post and grab boards? And then that ties into a whole other issue with the center position of what to do with Cam Corrin. If he's going to stay, if he's not leaving for the transfer portal, are you willing to commit to him for another full year as your top guy at the center position? And if you are, who's filling out your rotation, and how the hell is that going to work? Really? Are you comfortable going into next season with Cam Corrin and Papa Amanukanti as your centers? And if you're not, and you try and go get a guy out of the portal, how many guys are you, what are your realistic chances? First of all, at getting an impact center, everybody needs an impact center, so those guys are going to command top dollar, which, by the way, the money is insane right now. It's insane. It is absolutely insane, the numbers that are floating around. But if you're going to get a center, right, first of all, it's hard to find that big-time impact guy because they're going to command top dollar. And second of all, that center is probably going to look at him like, oh, let me see, coach. You're bringing back the guy who started every game last season, and you're bringing back the guy who was effectively his top backup. So where am I fitting into your rotation at center? How am I getting 25, 27 minutes per game when you bring back Cam Corrin and you bring back Papamanukanti? I think it's going to be tough. I think it's going to be tough. You probably are going to have more success finding guards and wings than you are finding a center. So you might have no choice. That unless those guys go into the portal, you're going to have Corrin and Conti. And so do you have to get a power forward who can rebound just to make up for the fact that your centers don't? That's tough. It's a lot of questions. I called this five things we know about the portal, or 5 thoughts on Pitt and the transfer portal. A lot of it's questions. Let's have questions in the mailbag tomorrow. Let's have questions in the 321 column. We got questions all over the place. So we'll take your questions in the mailbag. There's still time to submit questions for tomorrow's Morning Pitt mailbag. Go to the Between Fifth and Forbes message board at Panther-Lair.com on the 247 Sports Network. That way you can post your questions, and we'll answer as many as we can in the mailbag tomorrow. Plus, we'll have the 321 column tomorrow where we have 2 questions. We have 3 things we know, 2 questions we have, and 1 prediction. I'm guessing at least some of those questions, if not all, will be about Pitt basketball in the transfer portal. We'll try and write a little bit about football as well. We got a lot of content there at Panther-Lair.com for you to check out. And, of course, we have a lot of video content for you right here at YouTube.com/Panther-Lair.com. So make sure you like this video and subscribe to YouTube.com/Panther-Lair.com. That way you won't miss any of our Pitt video coverage. Thanks so much for tuning in today. I appreciate it. Let me know your thoughts and questions on Pitt in the transfer portal. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and we'll catch up with you tomorrow for the Morning Pitt mailbag right here on YouTube.com/Panther-Lair.com.